Imagine a world where a small cut, a sore throat, or a simple infection could become a fight for your life. There were no modern antibiotics, no easy treatment, no guarantee that a simple illness would stay simple. Then, one scientist made a discovery, almost by accident. His name was Alexander Fleming. But Fleming's story is not only about science. It is a story about curiosity, patience, mistakes, and noticing something that other people might have ignored. In this lesson, you will hear one of the most fascinating, real-life, inspirational success stories in English. As you learn English through storytelling, you will also discover how one unexpected observation changed medicine and saved millions of lives. This English listening practice for beginners is designed to help you learn English fast with clear, simple, and natural English. You can also improve your English vocabulary by listening to useful words in a real story. So, put on your headphones, listen carefully, and imagine you are standing inside Fleming's laboratory on the day he noticed something that would change the world forever. Part 1. Before Antibiotics. A Hospital Ward. London, 1928. The room is quiet, but not peaceful. A patient lies under a thin blanket. His breathing is weak. A doctor stands beside him, watching carefully. There is a small wound on his skin. Nothing dramatic, just a simple scratch. But within days, the wound becomes red, then swollen, then painful. The infection begins to spread through his body. The doctors try to help him. They clean the wound. They use the treatments available at the time. But there is something they cannot control. Bacteria. Bacteria are tiny organisms that can enter the body and cause infection. Before modern antibiotics, doctors had very few weapons against them. A small cut could become a serious medical emergency. A sore throat could sometimes become a deadly infection. And when the infection spread, doctors could be almost powerless. They were trained. They were experienced. They wanted to save their patients. But medicine did not yet have the powerful tools we take for granted today. Outside the hospitals, the world was changing. Radios were bringing news into people's homes. Cars were becoming more common. Airplanes were opening new possibilities. Science was moving forward at incredible speed. Yet inside hospital wards, an invisible enemy was still winning. Infection. Doctors needed something powerful to fight it. And this was the world where Alexander Fleming was doing his work. Fleming was a Scottish researcher who studied bacteria inside his laboratory. He was intelligent, curious, and always observant. But his laboratory was not always perfectly organized. Petri dishes were part of his daily work. A Petri dish is a shallow laboratory container used to grow and study microorganisms. One day, Fleming returned to his laboratory and noticed something unusual. One of his dishes had been contaminated by a type of mold. Normally, this might have looked like a mistake, something to throw away. But Fleming looked closer. Around the mold, the bacteria were disappearing. Something was killing them. And Fleming realized that this was not just a messy laboratory accident. It was a clue, a tiny clue that could lead to something enormous. A discovery that would change the history of medicine. Part 2. The Accidental Discovery. It was September 1928. Alexander Fleming had returned to his laboratory after a short vacation. He had left his work behind for several days. Now he was back. His laboratory looked much the same. But something had changed. On one of his petri dishes, Fleming noticed something unusual. A strange blue-green mold had grown across part of the dish. The sample looked ruined. At first, it might have seemed like nothing more than contamination. In a laboratory, contamination means something unwanted has entered a scientific experiment. For many researchers, the natural reaction would have been simple. Throw it away. Start again. Use a clean dish. Move on. But Fleming did something different. He looked a little closer. Around the mold, there was something very strange. The bacteria were not growing in that area. Instead, there was a clear space surrounding the mold. It looked like a tiny invisible circle where the bacteria could not survive. Scientists call this a zone of inhibition. It is a clear area where microorganisms fail to grow because something is stopping them. Fleming had found a powerful clue. The mold was producing something that could stop bacteria. Think about the importance of that moment. A contaminated dish had become a scientific discovery. A mistake had become a question. And the question was, what is killing the bacteria? Fleming did not have the complete answer yet, but he knew he had seen something important. The mold belonged to the genus penicillium, and the antibacterial substance it produced would eventually become known as penicillin. The discovery was not created by a perfect experiment. It began with something unexpected. A messy laboratory, a contaminated sample, and a scientist who was willing to stop and look again. That is an important lesson, far beyond science. Sometimes, the thing that looks like a failure may contain a valuable clue. Most people see a mistake and immediately try to erase it. Fleming saw a mistake and became curious. He did not choose perfection. He chose observation. And that small choice would help change the future of medicine forever. Part 3. Years of Struggle. Fleming had discovered something remarkable, but discovering something was only the beginning. The real challenge was turning that discovery into medicine. Inside the laboratory, Fleming and his colleagues tried to understand the substance produced by the mold. They called it penicillin. But there was a serious problem. It was difficult to collect. It was difficult to keep stable. And it was extremely difficult to produce in large amounts. Think about finding water in the middle of a desert. Finding it is one problem. Building a system to collect enough water for an entire city is something completely different. Penicillin had a similar problem. Fleming's discovery was promising, but promising was not enough. Doctors needed a medicine that could be produced reliably and used safely. For years, the potential of penicillin remained largely unfulfilled. The discovery was there. The possibility was there. But the technology and the scientific process needed to develop it were not yet ready. Then, years later, the story moved to Oxford. A new team began working on Fleming's earlier discovery. The team included Howard Florey, a pathologist, and Ernst Chain, a biochemist. They picked up the scientific torch that Fleming had first lit. Their work was not easy. They had to isolate and purify penicillin. They had to understand how it worked. They had to find ways to produce more of it. And eventually they had to test whether it could actually help sick patients. This is where the story becomes even more important. The world often remembers the moment of discovery. A scientist sees something, and suddenly history changes. But real science rarely happens that quickly. A discovery is like finding the first piece of a puzzle. The difficult part is finding the rest. Fleming provided the spark. Florey, Chain, and their colleagues helped turn that spark into something usable. It took patience. It took failure. It took careful experiments. And it took years of hard work. Because a miracle inside a petri dish is not yet a medicine. It becomes medicine only when scientists find a way to bring that discovery to the people who need it. Part 4. The War and Penicillin. Then, the world entered a darker chapter. World War II was spreading across continents. Millions of soldiers were being sent into battle. And on the battlefield, even a small wound could become a deadly infection. Penicillin had shown what it could do. But there was one enormous problem. There was not enough of it. Scientists had discovered a powerful medicine, but they needed to produce it on a massive scale. Britain was fighting a major war, and resources were limited. So, the search expanded across the Atlantic to the United States. American scientists and pharmaceutical companies began working on a difficult question. How can we make enough penicillin to treat thousands of wounded soldiers? The answer came from an unexpected place, a cantaloupe in Illinois. In 1943, scientists discovered a powerful strain of mold growing on a cantaloupe at a market in Peoria. The mold produced far more penicillin than Fleming's original strain. It was like finding a much stronger engine for a machine that was already working. Scientists then worked to improve the production process. They developed large-scale fermentation methods. Fermentation means using microorganisms in controlled conditions to produce a useful substance. Little by little, penicillin production increased dramatically. Factories began producing the medicine in quantities that had once seemed impossible. And the timing could not have been more important. By the later years of World War II, penicillin was being used to treat wounded soldiers. Infections that once could have turned a survivable wound into a death sentence could now be treated with a powerful new weapon. Think about how extraordinary that journey was. It started with a forgotten dish in Fleming's laboratory. Then, years of research followed. Then, a moldy cantaloupe helped provide the stronger strain needed for mass production. One small discovery had become a global medical effort. And on battlefields far from that original laboratory, penicillin was helping save lives. The world had found a new weapon against infection, and medicine would never be the same again. Part 5. The Legacy and Life Lessons. One small mistake inside a laboratory would change the future of medicine. Penicillin became one of the most important medical breakthroughs of the 20th century. It helped doctors treat serious bacterial infections that were once extremely dangerous. Diseases that could quickly turn deadly could now be fought. And the impact went far beyond one hospital, one laboratory, or even one country. Modern medicine had entered a new era. But the story of penicillin does not end with victory. Today, in 2026, the world faces a new challenge: antibiotic resistance. Some bacteria can now survive antibiotics that once killed them. One major reason is the misuse and overuse of these medicines. In simple words, a medicine that once protected us can become less effective when we use it carelessly. That makes Fleming's story more relevant than ever. His discovery was a gift to humanity. But every powerful tool must be used with responsibility. And perhaps the greatest lesson from Fleming's story is not only that he discovered penicillin, it is what he did when something went wrong. A contaminated dish looked like a failure. But Fleming looked closer. He asked questions. He followed the evidence, and that mistake became a breakthrough. Curiosity turned a laboratory mistake into a medical revolution. So remember, don't throw away every mistake. Sometimes mistakes hide opportunities. Your biggest mistake might contain your biggest opportunity. Fleming teaches us one powerful lesson. Look closer. Great discoveries do not always begin with perfect plans. Sometimes they begin with something unexpected. And this lesson is not only for scientists, it is also for you. If you make a mistake while speaking English, don't be afraid. Don't feel ashamed. And most importantly, don't give up. Maybe you make a grammar mistake. Maybe you pronounce a word incorrectly. Maybe you forget the right word while speaking. That does not mean you are failing. It means you are learning. Every mistake can become another step toward success. So speak, even when your English is not perfect. Keep listening, keep practicing, keep learning through real stories, because one day you may look back and realize those small mistakes helped you become more fluent, more confident, and more comfortable in English. So, don't be afraid of making mistakes. Look closer. Learn from them. Keep moving forward. And remember, a mistake is not always the end of the story. Sometimes it is the first page of a better one, and sometimes the smallest discovery can create the biggest change in the world. So keep learning, keep practicing, and keep moving forward. Till then, stay healthy, keep learning, and learn English through storytelling.